Hey there. So, welcome to the contract explanation video. I'm sure it'll be the most exciting video that you watch all day. I just wanted to put this together because it's a really fast-paced market. We don't always have time to sit down and go over this in person like I would prefer. And there's just a lot to these contracts. So it's good to have some basic context on what it is that you're looking at, what it is that you're signing. And so I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what these contracts look like. And I'm also going to send you a copy of the contract. So if you want to look at that while we're talking, if you want to pause the video, look it over, resume the video, do whatever you want. The world is your oyster. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first part of the contract is the Form 21. It is the residential purchase and sale contract. Looks like this at the front. Hopefully you can see that. But this is really the meat and bones of the contract. So this is where we go over things like the offer price. We go over what the earnest money looks like when you plan to close the sale, what of the appliances are included, what happens if you default on the contract. We also identify where we want to do title and escrow, and we also list the different addendums and contingencies that are going to be part of the contract. So all that is on the first page of this form, but it's actually a 6-page form. It is a good one to read because if you go through the following 5 pages, that is what is going to give some information and context about just different terms that you're going to see throughout the contract. You know, this goes over purchase price, earnest money, included items, condition of title, title insurance. It goes over how the timelines are gauged through the contract process. So a lot of really good information, but the Form 21 is really the one that sets the stage for the rest of the contract. So we'll go ahead and just start moving through the rest of it. So the next form that we're going to discuss is the financing addendum to the purchase and sale agreement. It's the Form 22A, and this is where we outline everything that has to do with the financing of the home that you plan to obtain. So it's going to go over what type of a loan you're getting. It could be a conventional loan, an FHA loan, a VA loan, just to name a few. We're going to tell them how much money you plan to put down. There's also some sections in here where if we wanted to waive the financing contingency, but only after a certain period of time, then we can agree to do that on this form. Another part of the form that's not getting used as often as it used to is if we were going to make any requests that the seller pay part of your closing costs, this is the form that we would use to do that. So just like the last form that we talked about, you know, the second and third page has a lot of information in regard to this particular addendum that if you read through it will provide you with some clarification on what some parts of this addendum mean or what they're referring to. So, you know, one portion of this that we'll talk about now, because it'll relate to another form that we talk about later, is the appraisal. So what happens if the home appraises for less than what your contract says, less than what your contracted offer is. So what happens in that scenario is there's really only one thing that a seller can do to force your hand to move forward. So let's say that you offered 500, that's what you're under contract at, and the appraisal comes in at 450,000. The only thing that the seller can do to force you to move forward is to just lower the price to 450,000. So if that happens, we just have to go ahead and move forward towards closing. But if they try to negotiate, if they say, hey, you know what, we're not going to take $1 off the price, or we're just going to split it with you, then at that point you have the option to just deny their request and you can back out and keep your earnest money. So again, there's a lot more information on this contract that if you want to go ahead and read through the second and third pages of this particular addendum, you know, it also talks about extension of closing and, you know, just everything as it, you know, relates to this financing addendum. So more good information in there if you want to go ahead and read the last few pages. And I'll just save my breath for the last pages that we have coming up, because generally at the end of pretty much any of these addendums or contingencies that we're going to talk about, there is going to be explanations of you know, what is included in those contingencies or addendums. There's going to be explanations in there that you can read through that will help you understand more clearly that part of the contract. So let's go ahead and kick on over to the next one. Okay, so this next form works with the financing addendum that we just talked about, and it has to do with low appraisals. So this form is called the 22AD, and it's the increased down payment for low appraisal addendum. And what it's stating is that if the appraisal comes in low, this form lets you tell the seller that you have additional funds that you can use to bridge that gap between any low appraisal and the contracted price. But one thing to note is that this money has to be extra money that you have above and beyond what we already told them you were going to put down. So if we already said, hey, we're going to put down 20%, then we have to have that 20% to put down plus the availability of this extra amount of money that we're offering them if it appraises low. So here's how the form works. We choose how much money you're willing to put in over a low appraised value in order to get it back up to that contracted price. So let's say you're under contract for $500,000, and on this form we tell the seller that you have up to $50,000 of additional down payment to cover any gap between an appraised value and the contracted purchase price. So let's just say the appraisal comes in and the house appraises at $470,000. Since we offered up to $50,000, then you're only going to put in $30,000 of that 50 so that you bridge that gap between 470 and 500. You're never agreeing to pay over the contracted price. So even though you're offering 50 and it came in at 470, you're not just telling them, hey, I'm going to pay $50,000 over the appraised value. It's only up to $50,000, but not exceeding that contracted price. So again, it's a little bit of a confusing form. I get a lot of questions on it. We'll probably have more that we have to discuss. But when another form that we're going to talk about is, escalating the price from your starting offer to your max price. When prices are escalating above the asking price, the sellers sometimes get worried about the home not appraising. So when we have the opportunity or the ability to use this addendum, it's a really powerful tool that helps the seller be confident in accepting your offer at that escalated price. And I've had a lot of clients who might not have had the highest offer, but they had a higher amount on this particular form, which made the seller more confident in accepting their offer. So it really is a powerful tool if we can use it. Again, I know it's kind of confusing. Ask me questions about it. But for now, we'll move on to the next form. The next form that we see in almost every contract is the 22D, which is the optional clauses addendum. And this one outlines a few different things. It says things like the buyer's broker and the seller's broker, we didn't go out and measure the square footage of the house. So we don't make any representations concerning the accuracy of the lot size or the square footage of the home. We establish whether or not you're going to get a higher end or lower end title policy. And we say that, we check boxes that say the house is going to be cleaned, they're going to have their possessions out of the house or they become your possessions. The utilities are, connected to public utilities, or is it a well or a septic? If it's new construction, there's notes about the insulation that they used. If there's any property that is leased, like a propane tank, it's a box that we can check that says, hey, we want to make sure that we get a copy of that lease and get a sign off on it and make sure that it's okay with you. If you want to review an HOA, this is where we state that you want some extra time built into the contract where you can review the HOA. And if you don't like what's in there, then again, you can cancel the contract based on the findings, in those HOA documents. If there's homeowners association transfer fees, who's going to pay those? So it's just a lot of little kind of miscellaneous items like that that get put onto this form. But again, it's a form that we, really commonly see in most offers that are presented. We're going to do two forms at once on this one because they're both kind of short. So this one is the Form 22K. It's the Identification of Utilities Addendum. And this one just lets the closing agent administer the disbursement of closing funds to satisfy any unpaid utility charges on the seller's behalf. So it's just a form where we let them know who the utility providers are, and it lets the title department go ahead and take care of those payments before closing. So easy breezy. The next one is the Form 22T, which is the title contingency. And this one is the form that allows you to review a copy of the preliminary commitment for title insurance. And it lets you look over any easements or covenants, conditions, restrictions on record, just to make sure that there's nothing that's encumbering the property that's going to make it so that you can't use it in the way that you're intending to. If there is anything on that report that you disapprove of, then we make a request for the seller to satisfy those issues. And if they don't want to do that, then you can back out again and keep your earnest money. And if they do agree to take care of those items that are of concern, then it's one of those things where they have to have it done prior to closing. Just to give an example of something that you might see on, where maybe you'd have an issue is if, there is an easement, we don't really see this in the city so much, but if we were looking out in the county and there was an easement that, you have to cross somebody else's property to get to your property or vice versa, if there's any kind of shared maintenance agreements for that easement or any disputes of the easement, then we want to be able to know these things and be able to clear up those issues before closing. So that's going to be, just kind of in a nutshell, again, kind of a brief explanation of, what the title contingency is going to be in place for. So the next two forms are all about inspections, and we're going to go over two forms because we don't always get to have the inspection before we make the offer. And so it's just different forms that we would use for different scenarios. So the first one is the Form 35, which is just the inspection addendum to the purchase and sale agreement. And this is the form that we would use if we want to have a home inspection, but we didn't have the chance to do it before making the offer. So on this particular form, we're going to outline how many days we have to complete the inspection, then respond to the seller. There's also additional time for inspection. So, we're going to outline how many days we have extra if we need to have extra. I'm going to keep saying the word extra. If we need to have more inspections based on the findings of the home inspector. So, for example, if the home inspector was looking at the house and he said, hey, this roof looks like it's about shot, I would recommend having a roofer come out and gauging the remaining life. Then we would say, hey, Mr. Seller, the home inspector said that we need to get a roofer out here and we would like to do that. And then you're automatically given X amount of days to complete that secondary inspection. The contract says you'd have 5 days to do that, but that's a number that you can change. If we wanted to have more or less days, then we can go ahead and note that on this contract. The other part of this form also outlines the seller's response, how long they have to respond to the requests that you're making, how quickly they need to have those repairs completed. And you can also stipulate that you want the chance to almost inspect the neighborhood. It's called the neighborhood review contingency. So if you wanted to take some time and drive through the neighborhood or knock on neighbors' doors or anything like that, then it affords you the ability to go ahead and have that as a contingency to the contract. So again, this is the one that we use if we're making the offer and have yet to have an inspection, but you want to have one, which I always recommend. The other form is the 35W, which is what they call an inspection waiver addendum. And there's different parts of this, the different boxes you can check. So one of them is just the straight up waiver of inspection. I never recommend that. You're going to be spending, say $500,000. You should probably get what you're buying inspected. But you can check a box that just says, hey, you know what? I'm comfortable just waiving this inspection. not worried about it. What I try to do in this kind of a scenario, though, is usually we have a little bit of time between looking at the house and making the offer. So if in that interim we can actually have a home inspector come out and inspect the home before we make an offer on it, then we can at least have the peace of mind of knowing, what the property looks like, inside and out before you actually place the offer. So in that case, there's a box on here that we would just check that says pre-inspection conducted. And other times we get lucky and the seller has conducted an inspection, which they will provide the report to us prior to listing the house. So, again, a couple different forms that we can use for inspections. It's pretty common right now, just because the market's moving so fast that it's important to have the inspection done before we make the offer, if at all possible, just because that's the most common reason that people use to back out of a contract is that inspection addendum. And so if we can give the seller the peace of mind of knowing that we're not going to back out based on the findings of an inspection, that's a really great way to strengthen your offer. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but it's, again, probably a pretty common component of winning offers right now is not having that inspection addendum, unfortunately, and instead having a pre-inspection conducted. So thanks for hanging in there with me. We're almost done. Okay, we finally made it to the last page. And this is a good one. This is an important form that gets used a lot in a really competitive market because it allows you to basically start off at a lower price, but then let the seller know that you're willing to pay more only if there are competing offers. And so the way that that works is we can say, okay, on the front page of the purchase and sale agreement, we're offering $500,000. And then on this form, we establish what your absolute top price is. So let's say you offered $500,000 on the front page of the contract. On this form, we say, hey, you know what? My max price is $600,000, but only if there's competing offers. And we also stipulate how much you'll beat any competing offer by. So on this form, we'd put the $600,000 as your top price. And then let's just say we'll use $5,000, a pretty regular number, to beat the next offer by. And if they're going to use this form to escalate your starting price, they actually have to show us the competing offer. So again, let's just say you offered $500,000 on the front page. Your max escalation is up to $600,000 in increments of $500,000. The seller receives another offer from somebody different, and let's just say that that's for $550,000. This form lets them automatically escalate your offer in that scenario to $555,000. And like I said, they show us a copy of that competing offer. So it eliminates the going back and forth of negotiation and just says, look, here's my starting price on the front page. This form tells you my max price. I'll beat any offers by X amount of dollars. And then it just lets your offer automatically escalate to that without the back and forth. There's certainly some more information on, this document to go over. This little form right here, probably can't see it very well, is the little worksheet that they use to fill in the new purchase price, if there is one. So again, something that's really regularly used in this market and, is probably a pretty common piece of most winning offers is having something like this in there. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I'm sure it wasn't the most exciting thing you've watched all day, but hopefully it was informative and hopefully it will just bring about some more questions. So I look forward to talking with you more about it and getting you a home. All right, bye.